Two fundamental aspects of modern responsive design are, without a doubt, deciding about going mobile first or desktop first with our website or app, as well as selecting breakpoints for our project when writing media queries. So in this lecture, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's dive right into it. In the desktop first approach, we optimize our interfaces for the large screens, and therefore we start by writing CSS code for these large screens into our CSS file. This is what we've been doing all this time in the Natives project, right? Now later, when we make the website responsive, we simply write media queries in order to shrink the design to fit to smaller screens. This is the more traditional way of doing things, and also the easier way to learn, in my opinion. The way we do this is by writing media queries that test for max width. And if that's confusing to you, no problem, I'm gonna explain that in the next slide. But for now, let's see how the mobile first strategy is different. In mobile first, we start writing CSS code for smaller screens in order to optimize for mobile, and then move up to larger screens from there using media queries. And in this case, we do this by writing media queries that test for min width. So it's basically just the opposite workflow. Now, even bigger than the technical aspects of mobile first is the philosophy that's behind this strategy, which is that we, the designers, really have to think about the mobile experience by reducing our websites or apps to the absolute essentials, striping away everything that's not really necessary in order to end up with a smaller and faster final product. We're gonna discuss this a bit more in a second, but for now, let's move on to the more technical and more exciting aspects of responsive design. So, since we were talking about desktop and mobile first strategies, this is an excellent time to talk about the difference between the type of media queries that we have to write for each approach: max width for desktop first and min width for mobile first. Maybe you've always been using max width media queries, but without really understanding how they work. And so that's what I want to clear up right now. So as an example, we have here a pixel spectrum going from 0 to infinity, with a couple of breakpoints in them, 600, 900 and 1200 pixels. Let's start with desktop first. And remember that we start by writing CSS for larger screens, and so our initial code is on the right side of this spectrum, right? Now, in order to adapt our designs to smaller screens, we write max width media queries, like this one. So max width 600 pixels. So what this media query does is that it basically checks if the current viewport width is smaller or equal to 600 pixels. And if it is, then all the CSS code that is in this media query will apply. And if not, that specific code will just not apply. So what this means is that the max width is 600 because that is the maximum width at which the media query still works. It still applies. And after that, it stops working. Now in these media queries, what we do is just override some specific parts of the global CSS code. Only the parts that we want to change, because all the rest of the global code will of course still apply. So think of media queries as tools to overriding specific parts of our CSS for specific viewport width. Alright, and so the same of course works for the next breakpoint and the next media query, which is max width 900 pixels in this case. So all of the code that is in this query will work as long as the width is less or equal to 900. In other words, as long as the maximum width is 900 pixels. But maybe now you're wondering, what if a phone has a width of 500 pixels? Which media query will apply now? And that's an excellent question, and the answer is pretty simple actually. Both queries will apply, because both conditions are true, right? 500 is less than 600, but also less than 900 pixels, and so the code in both media queries will be applied. Now, if you have conflicting CSS rules in these queries, which is usually the case, like defining the global font size in both media queries, then the one which appears last in the code is the one that takes precedence, just like you learned in a lecture about the cascade. Remember that one? That's because media queries don't add any importance or specificity to our selectors, and so the order of the code matters a lot. And that's why we keep our media queries always at the end. But don't worry if this sounds overwhelming right now, because we're going to apply all of this over the next couple of lectures. And just to complete the example with the last breakpoint, here is how the media query looks like for 1200 pixels. So at 1200 pixels is the width at which we start doing some changes in our media queries. Above 1200 pixels, we have the desktop version of our project outside of any media queries. Okay, and with this, we have the full picture of this example project with a desktop-first approach. So let's now look at the mobile-first approach, where our initial CSS code is obviously on the left side of the pixel spectrum, where the mobile phone screens are. So where before we had max width media queries, we now have min width queries, like this min width 600 pixels, which basically asks the question, is the current viewport width larger or equal to 600 pixels? If so, then the code applies. So it's called a min width query because 600 pixels is the minimum width at which the media query starts to apply. Now visually speaking, this translates to a pixel range starting from 600 pixels covering all the way until infinity, basically. So all screens with a width larger than 600 pixels will have the code in this media query applied to the page. Make sense? Now we have to use this type of media query in the mobile-first approach because basically we want the queries to stay away from our smaller screen styles. So we want them to work for bigger screens, and so the max width approach we had before wouldn't work. You can see that very nicely with the arrows in the diagram and the pixel range that each query covers. Okay? So again, in mobile first, with our media queries, we want to stay away from the small screen sizes. And so that's why we have to use min width media query types. And so now for the remaining two breakpoints, the logic is pretty much the same as for the desktop first strategy. So for the 900 pixel breakpoint, we have a min width 900 pixel media query, which is activated if the viewport width is larger or equal to 900 pixels, of course. And the same for 1200 pixels. So it's just the same logic as before. Alright, did you get that? Now that we know everything about mobile first and desktop first, let's try to decide what's actually best for you, depending on your unique situation and project, by looking at the pros and cons of mobile first design. So, we already saw that the whole strategy behind mobile first is to narrow down our interfaces, being it websites or apps, to the bare minimum in order to create a small, fast and efficient product completely optimized for mobile users. And this actually makes a ton of sense in a world that's becoming more and more mobile, with a huge part of the internet traffic already coming from mobile. Another big advantage of mobile first is that having all these design constraints on smaller screens, we automatically prioritize content over purely aesthetic design, which also makes sense because I'm sure that you've heard the sentence, content is king, right? However, the problem with this strategy is that we end up with the opposite problem, where the larger desktop version might feel overly empty and simplistic. I mean, why having an advanced system like a huge desktop computer if websites don't even use the device's resources and capabilities, right? Also, if you're like me and more used to see a whole lot of desktop websites, then it may seem a bit weird, even counterintuitive, and also difficult to develop mobile first. That's simply because a larger canvas where you can start designing without so many restrictions will give you much more creative freedom, which is great to set your websites apart from the competition. Plus, if you're developing websites for clients, they usually like to see a desktop version of the site as a prototype, and not just a super striped down mobile version. So that's also something you have to consider. And finally, users of a particular website in a certain business niche might not even use the mobile internet that much and prefer to use a normal computer to check out websites. We always need to consider the purposes of a website and align it with our users' needs. So this is another question you have to ask yourself when deciding which strategy to choose. Alright, So this might look like there are more cons than pros to mobile first. But it's not that simple, of course. I've seen a lot of designers online saying that they actually don't build mobile first at all. But of course, there are also people building like this. Each project is a project, and in each case, in the end, it's you who has to decide what's best. There's just one important piece of advice that I have to give you, and that I follow myself, which is that no matter what you decide, always keep both the desktop and the mobile versions in mind, and understand that they're both important. You should never design only for one of the solutions and just leave the other one as an afterthought. Alright? Does that make sense? Now about the natives project that we've been working on, you have probably already noticed that we're using a desktop-first approach, simply because I would find it extremely difficult to teach you all the concepts that I've taught you so far on a small screen with all the restrictions that we've been talking about. It just wouldn't be practical at all. And so the media queries we're going to write next are all of the type max width. But that's not a problem at all, because in the last slide, and in this lecture in particular, I've given you everything you need to know to start building mobile-first websites for yourself, if you think that that's the best strategy for you. It's really not such a big difference, and I do highly encourage you to try it out for yourself. Again, I did it this way in this course because it's just easier to teach and also to learn, in my opinion. But on your next real-life project, you should totally try it out if it makes sense for you. Alright, moving on, we need to also talk about breakpoints. Remember that breakpoints are the viewport width at which we want our design to change, or in other words, where we want to put our media queries. No matter what we decide about going mobile first or desktop first, one thing that is for sure is that we have to select breakpoints for our design. And for me, there are three major ways of doing so: the bad, the good, and the perfect way. Unfortunately, the bad way is also the most used way of choosing breakpoints, and it consists of simply using the width of popular devices as the breakpoints. And designers really like to use Apple products like the iPhone and the iPad to set breakpoints for their screen width. And while this is the easiest way, it has a couple of problems. First, you're optimizing for one very specific device, ignoring all the users of other devices, which may be even more used than the Apple products. And second, and even more important I think, is that this strategy is not future-proof at all. If tomorrow Apple decides to completely change resolutions on all their devices, do you want to go ahead and change all your media queries on all the projects that you've ever built? I don't think so, right? We've been talking a lot about reusable and maintainable code, and using specific devices as breakpoints is completely against all that logic. Now, of course it's okay to use this strategy if you're just starting out with responsive design and just want to learn how it works. But if you want to get more serious, it's time to move on to a better way, which I like to call the good way. In the good way, we look at all the most used device width on the entire internet, try to group them together in a logical way, and then pick our breakpoints from that. And while it's still not ideal to use real devices to figure out breakpoint, it's already a lot better than the first way, because we're using a lot of devices and we're also using the most popular device width. Plus, we're not setting breakpoints at one specific point, but between similar device width. Alright, and now the perfect way to do this is to ignore devices altogether and only look at your content in your design. So ideally it works like this. You begin at one size, either mobile or desktop, and then start increasing your screen width, or decreasing for desktop first. Then, as soon as the design breaks, which means that the design no longer works, it no longer looks okay, then you insert a new breakpoint. And that's it. So again, you just put the breakpoints wherever your design starts to look weird and out of place, and don't think about devices at all. Now the thing is that this approach can be extremely difficult, and that's why not many people are doing it. Without the constraints of at least a couple of predefined breakpoints, it's hard to find the best ones, and not to end up with really a bunch of them. And that's why we're going to use the second method I showed you, which I call the good way. But you should totally try this perfect way in the future, okay? You really should. It's a great exercise to design without the constraints of having predefined breakpoints. Now, with the second approach that I showed you, we start with the most used screen size that we can get from an app called StatCounter. So this data is freely available on the internet. This one is for the range between August 2016 and August 2017. But if you're watching this video in 2018, 2019 or even 2020, these stats will probably not have changed that much. And even if they did, you can just use this strategy with the new screen sizes and select your breakpoints from there. Anyway, in this diagram, I just plotted these most used screen sizes that you can see in the chart down there. So from this, you can already see pretty good how we could group these screen sizes, right? So usually we need one breakpoint for phones, one for portrait tablets, one for landscape tablets, and one for the desktop. There can be more, of course, but these are the basics. So where do you think these breakpoints should be based on this diagram? And here's how I would position them. So the phone ranging from 0 to 600 pixels, from 600 to 900 the portrait tablets, from 900 to 1200 the landscape tablet, and from there it's the desktop. I actually even included a breakpoint for big desktops, starting at 1800 pixels, but that one is not really mandatory. It's just if we want to give users with these huge screens something special. Now this could be different, of course. It's actually a bit subjective. But as long as it makes sense, and it does, I think, then it's great. Now, just to give you some perspective, these are the iPhone 8, iPad Portrait and Landscape, and MacBook Pro 15-inch. And yeah, it is totally okay to call this iPhone or iPad or MacBook. And in fact, we can and should use these devices to test our responsive designs. What we should not do, though, is to just use their width as breakpoints. But we already talked about that. Alright, and that's it for this lecture. I hope it made a lot of things clearer to you. And now, all we have to do is to actually implement these media queries, so don't wait and come with me straight to the next lecture. See you there.